Hey there, Ryan Kingslien here. How are you doing? I want to talk to you about what anatomy is. Not only that I'm going to show you what it is, but first I want to get you thinking. When I say anatomy, what do you think of? Probably bicep, tricep, pectoralis, or some thousands of words that you've got to remember, right? But keep in mind that words aren't the only part of the story. Think about the word Los Angeles. When I say Los Angeles, if you've lived there or if you've been there or visited, it's not just a word, it's an experience, it's a space, a color, a taste, sound. Artistic anatomy is about us getting into the human body and being able to understand how this is more than just a map. This is the bicep, but it's also a cylinder. It's the tricep, but the tricep is a sphere with a cylinder underneath it, tapers down and that connects, right? And that when we raise our hand like this, the tricep, because of the weight, drops down. And the tricep is the biggest, it really helps inform the whole shape of somebody's arm and whether or not they've got a strong muscular thing. So, we know that if somebody's really tense and big, we're going to emphasize the tricep. Pectoralis, big and strong for the chest, or we're going to kind of cave it in and start to show the second, third, and fourth rib if we want somebody to appear like they're hungry or thinner or something of that nature. Anatomy becomes a tool for us to shape the sounds, the feelings, the sights, the taste that somebody else is going to have when they look at our artwork. Artistic anatomy is a tool for us to be able to influence somebody else. And learning that means that we've got to learn a lot more than just the names. So check out this drawing, this thing that I'm working on, and how I'm using anatomy to kind of create an experience or a feeling. Check it out.
So one of the first things that we have to deal with when we're drawing is not anatomy as it's traditionally understood in terms of muscles and bones, but it is instead trying to find the shapes. So the primary shape for this was a sphere. And one of the really interesting parts was finding how this lines up with the cheekbones and the bottom of the nose. And then finding out where's the halfway point and what lines up with that. So notice the brow is almost there at the halfway point. Let's go a step further. Let me show that to you on the actual reference. So he's going to hate me for this, but this is one of those parents' infamous bathtub photos of their children, right? And here it is my boy Audie. When we try to get him out, he's not happy. And this is his not happy face. But let's take a look here. You see there's a sphere. Let's just do a quick measurement from side to side, and then I'm going to try to go to the top of the head and down. There's a sphere that comes right about here. Now, then we pull out some side posts here and draw a straight line down along that area, and we try to figure out how much further down to the jaw. So this measurement of A is essentially 1/3 of the sphere. At least if we're using this measurement. That can, plus or minus, that can go up a little bit. One of the tricks, one of the things that you can do to start to really understand that is actually go over your photo reference with tracing paper and see how you can extract it, what kind of information you can kind of pull. Now, the next thing that you see me doing here is actually really important, because while I've looked at the proportions and I've looked at it with a basic generic shape of a sphere, pulling down another little shape here for the muzzle of the mouth, what I also discovered looking at the reference is that in terms of the form itself, not just the silhouette, but the form itself actually consists of two spheres. And these spheres, this is where it comes into the eyeball, then it becomes part of the cranium, and that's the forehead. Okay, of course you add hair out here. And then this becomes cheek, 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 cheek. And so I end up shading this particular area, just like I'm doing right now. So let me switch over to the other video. Let's see how this one works. I'm going to start with the sphere right off the bat, and then I'm going to go in and start to extract some of those other measurements and get some of the basic contour and basic form involved. Now this is a sped up version. One of the other things I do is I start to go in and I start to find some of the features, but not the features. This is a really important point because drawing is it's got a little bit of Zen in it. I'm not putting the mouth in. I'm putting in features. Corner of the mouth, down plane of the upper lip. Okay, down plane of the nose. Orbit of the eye. It's eventually going to become literally the orbit of the eye, and I'm going to sketch the anatomy in. I'm starting to indicate the zygomatic bone, and I'm starting to put in the masseter, the jaw, the mandible, and start to get the sense of temporal, not the temporalis, but the mentalis and things of that nature. Again, really basic. It's not the nose, it's not the mouth. You can't think that. If you think it, you'll draw it and it'll be wrong. It is the down plane of the upper lip, down plane of the lower lip. And there I am, putting in that basic two-sphere structure. So again, the shadow comes around like that. The highlight hits right here because it's in front and above. And then I'm putting in the shadow in my second form. So these are two interlocking spheres. And that's really the basic shape. So we got proportions and we got a little bit of contour. Now I'm building up some value, getting some charcoal on there, because in terms of technical strategies, charcoal is just such a loose medium that it's really easy for it to just go astray and for values to change super quick. So what I'm doing now, another part of the technical strategy, is just putting in some compressed charcoal just to start to lock down some of the values so I don't lose these right away. Sometimes you'll see artists start with compressed charcoal. It's a little aggressive. It's a little harder for beginners. But you start with compressed charcoal because then you get the values in place and now you can start to massage it. It's a little harder to remove those. But then again, once you have experience with the medium, you kind of know what you want to be doing. Now, this is kind of an intermediary stage. I'd already established lighting, but right now I'm in an intermediary stage where sometimes things go awry for me. The drawing starts to fail, and so you can see there's a telltale sign that something's wrong. I've gone over this area twice, 3 times, 4 times probably, and I've gone over this area multiple times. This is part of our psychological strategies. We need to be mindful of when we keep going over the same areas, because that means something's wrong in our thinking. We shouldn't necessarily be going over it. It's fine. There's nothing that's at the end all be all just, drop dead wrong. It's just there's something wrong with the approach. You need to get some more information into your drawing, which is exactly what I end up doing. So I step back and I'm like, this is wrong, something's not working, and I'm really just massaging halftones way too much. So I need to get much more crystal clear about this. You see, going over the same area a couple of times. This is the moment where I'm like, well, I need line. But I decide not to use that pencil, and instead what I'm going to do now is come in with vine charcoal, and I'm start to establish some more of those down planes and shadows. Some more of that structure as well. Also, this is charcoal, so things can really shift. And one of the things that just happened is this head literally just shifted as I adjusted some of those angles. And there we go. That's the very beginning of anatomy being put in there. This is stage 1 of anatomy being put. This is the glabella. Superciliary arch is above that, but this is very distinctly the glabella going into the nasal bone, coming down to the frontal process of the maxilla, which is right here, coming around to the infraorbital margin of the eye, coming up to the frontocephenoidal process of the maxilla, and then over here to what's known as the external angular process of the frontal bone. You'll see that in a lot of anatomy books. It's a little triangle that catches light and starts to send off the temporal line. Okay, I'm also starting to distinguish the down plane of the nose a little bit clearer, and so there's some interplay here between what we traditionally know of as anatomy and what we think of in terms of planes and values and shape and form. But this is very clear. Orbit of the eye, not infraorbital margin. Yeah, that's infraorbital margin. Establishing the lips a little bit clearer, the down planes, the space in between. Things get gestural at this point because I'm using a very thick vine charcoal tool. It's a little hard to work thick and still keep some precision. But one of the things that you've seen me do right here, I had this orbit of the eye, but the eye is a bit of a different beast. So I've got the orbit of the eye in here. But what I really need to do now is I need to give a sense that there's actually a ball sitting inside there. So in order to do that, what I've started to do is lighten this area, which would correspond to about right here. I'm lightening that, and then I'll be able to kind of darken everything else and darken everything else, but lighten right in that area to start to bring out some value. It's a real simple smudge. It's a tiny smudge. You see me doing a little bit of smudging right in there to start to bring it. But it's that level of subtlety that can really help us. It's also what you want to be developing, is the ability to make tiny shifts in value and understand what that's all about. That's one of the most important parts of anatomy. If you understand anatomy, you have a clear sense of the intricate working of, in this case, the human face. You know how the eye interacts, the palpebral ligaments, what those are. Those are basically eyelids, where they connect. You know their general relationship to each other, so you know that, say, that lower eyelid is going to catch light. So I've just gone in here and I've put some white charcoal in there, and that was really just to visually help me understand what I needed to adjust and change up. It all gets blended and blurred in later. This is a very loose approach that I have in this video. It's loose, but there's just this amazing freedom in it. It's not controlled or classical in a traditional sense. What I'm doing at this point, I'm stopping the video here for a second. What I'm doing at this point is really getting in and starting to respond. I want you to think about something. Classical drawing is what they might call a hard skill. You have to start with the drawing and start with the form, and you build up from there. And so if something's wrong in the foundation, something's going to be very wrong in the painting later on. So this is a classical painting approach where you do your drawing, then you put your color on it or your value, and then you put your color on top of that. That is one way, like a Flemish technique. But then there is also a more Baroque technique, a more alla prima technique, where you're working on everything and changing stuff up, and everything's much more immediate. That's much more of what you would call a soft skill. It requires you to be more responsive to things in the environment. You need to, it's the difference between playing soccer and playing violin. If you're playing violin, you need everything to progress correctly from stage one. Hold the bow correctly, or you destroy your hand and your career before you even start it. When you play soccer, you need to be able to respond to all kinds of things. And a lot of things vary based on what your purpose is. So if you're in more of a illustrative mode, you need to get something done, then a classical approach where you're much more controlled gets the job done. But in a more contemporary fine art perspective, you're responding to the model more. So you need anatomy as part of your toolbox, but you're going to tweak things a little bit. You're going to adjust them because you're the artist. You're creating the vision. You're creating your own movie through the use of color, line, value, contrast, things like that. A Lucian Freud painting is different than the model because it's Lucian Freud's perspective, his response. Now, I come in with this Derwent pencil, ivory black, 6700, and I start to define the lower, basically the down plane of the upper lip, upper eyelid. And then I go in and I start to put a couple of, what I love to do is just these little anatomical notations, leaving these little lines all over the place. Just to give it this sense that this is drawn. This is really the core, or beginning to be the core of applying anatomy to the model, because I'm now starting to make a distinction between the zygomatic and the cheek fat, for example. This is a really good example right there on the side. You've got the zygomatic bone coming in, and then you literally have the infraorbital triangle. You have this cheek fat swelling up in there, and then that's swelling up with the nodule at the side of the mouth, and then that comes into the lip, and all of that's racing down. There's all this volume happening in there. But we're putting the anatomy in now. One of the great things of working with charcoal is you paint both with darks and with lights. It's why charcoal is one of the closest approximations to painting that you can get in the drawing medium. At this point, I could leave it at any stage, but I do get in and I start to adjust the nose a little bit more. You can see I kind of just destroyed it, and so now I freak out a little bit, and I got to get clear. So when I got to get clear, one of the first things that I like to do is I like to grab the Derwent pencil and just start to do some of the line work to help me understand it. So I'm adjusting, say, where that down plane of the nose is, where the light is going to kind of hit it, drawing it with a stump, which just means it's a very light drawing tool. And there we go. Little anatomical notations. So little notations for, this is not just a black spot for the nostril. This is, let me put the round spot of the nostril. This comes in, and then you can see here's the nostril itself. That's coming around, and then we're going to have the the alar cartilage is going to come and swing in here. I'm envisioning this as I draw it. Even though I'm just kind of delineating these simple points, I can still see this in my mind, and I'm thinking of, okay, so I need the light to hit here and the light to hit pretty much right here. There's two places the lateral cartilage is going to help separate things, because maybe this is the nasal bone and then the lateral cartilage kicks up down in that area. The anatomy comes in the traditional sense at this stage of making this thing start to have its own life. You can't separate anatomy from form, from value, from light, from gesture. You can't separate it. But when you master anatomy, then you put yourself in the position to be able to start to create those halftones that really add so much life to the model. And this is not a classical drawing with like classical halftones and lighting structures. In this case, and one of the things I really love to do is I love to use anatomy as a response tool. It's in my toolbox. I'm responding to what I see, and I'm using color, light, value, edge, all of that stuff to start to create an emotion. Almost like I'm making a movie. Think of Steven Spielberg or any of these amazing directors, Ridley Scott. Do they care if the sound is accurate in their film? Think of Godfather and that scene where Al Pacino performs his first hit. And you have that train in the background building and adding tension, but there's no train anywhere around there. Because our job here is not to be accurate. That's a documentarian, that's a journalist, right? Think of a journalist. They use the same words poets use. A journalist, the news, Fox News, they all use the same words that poets use. But the effect is totally different. So you and I might create the same things that a photograph might create, but with a complete command of anatomy, of value, of shape, what we're able to do is poetry. We're able to take the form that's out there in the world, create our poetry.
All right, Ryan Kingslien here. Thank you so much for watching, and please share this video on your favorite social network. Give me a shout out on Facebook. Let me know how things are going for you. And if you found this useful, check me out on Twitter, Instagram, and thank you for helping to spread the word. Happy sculpting.